Good evening, everybody.
How are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to the last halacha here in this chapter. It says like this. Yesh matirin chita shenimtzet bezefek tarnagolet, right? So this is also something which we're we're not going to find very often, right, nowadays. But it's talking about you found wheat in the crop of the chicken. Hope I'm saying that word properly. Crop, right? That's the intestines where the chicken excretes whatever. I don't know, God knows. Right. So they found the wheat there, and kedaminan gabet.
Her neck.
I'm sorry.
In the neck. It's in the chicken's neck.
Okay, yeah, maybe so. Maybe I'm saying the wrong word because the zefek is not the neck. It's the entrails. That's why I wanted to make sure I use the right word. It's talking about the digestive system. You know what I mean? By us it'll be like the large intestines. Colon, right? I don't know. God knows, whatever, right? Something like that. But birds have a different system. They're not mammals, so they don't have the same system as we do. Okay, whatever, right? You get the idea. So it's on its. In other words, to say it in the street language, right? It's on its way out. If you know what I mean. Okay, you get the idea. It's not in the neck, right? That's not what it is. Okay, whatever. So anyway, right? That's found. So they found it over there, and so it says, so it says, right, that since we found it in the entrails, in other words, it's on its way out, as we said, right? So it's already been through a digestive system. And therefore it's digested already. Oh, digested. What does that mean for me? So therefore it will not leaven, right? That's it, because it's already been transformed. So this is the second time we see, right, in these halachot that this concept that once the nature of a certain food has been transformed, right, some form or other, it's chemically transformed or whatever, so it doesn't have the same status anymore. So that's why he says, right, that at this point it will not leaven anymore. Okay, so that's the story there, right? So he says, so he says it's not even called food anymore, right? Just waste product. Good point. Okay. So he says, but there's another opinion, right, which says that you can't really, learn this out like that. So I'll explain to you what that means, right? It seems like that they're learning this from a prohibition when it comes to regarding, right, purity and impurity, right, tuma and tahara. So he says you can't learn prohibitions from purity and impurity. Doesn't really match up. So he says therefore it doesn't really you can't really learn from one to the other, and therefore he says, right, that it may be that it's not really considered to be digested or whatever. In other words, it is digested obviously, but What it means to say is that it's still the same kind of food that it was before. So he says his father, the Rosh, agreed with that. So right with the second opinion, that it seems like he's stringent about this. Okay, interesting.
So
So
Jastrow has a Zepek as a crop.
oh, okay. So, but are you sure it's in the neck?
The crop is in the neck, yes.
Right. So I no, it cannot be because we're talking about, it's already digested.
Well, they do, it's like a holding area in the neck after they swallowed it. They hold it there and like some of the foods begins to digest.
But I don't think it's talking about that. For some, because I'll tell you something.
It's at the beginning of
This
the digestive system.
this word, Zefek, uh I've learned it, where the source is for this word in the Bible?
Yeah,
It's with the sacrifices.
right.
So over there it talks about the fact that there's parts of the bird, like digestive system, So this is considered the Zefek. Anyway, I'll look into it. It's very interesting what you're saying.
Well, I'm just wondering if that has
Yeah.
anything to do with why
But from the
grateful.
context over here also, you can see, right, that it's talking about the entrails,
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's before the stomach,
Okay.
right? So it's
I'm
probably,
sorry.
that's what I'm wondering, if
I'm sorry.
there,
What was that again?
I'm wondering if that's why there's a machloket about this, because it's not like, it's not fully digested, but it's part of the digestive system.
No, I don't think that's the story. No, it's not talking about that. It's not saying here that it's partially digested. Everybody agrees that it's fully digested. The only question is, right, that is it considered to be now a different substance?
Okay,
You know what I mean? So okay, whatever. I'll look into that. That's very,
okay.
yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
so whatever, right? Anyway, right? Okay, that's interesting. So you're saying the crop is in the neck, huh?
Yeah, it's so like after they swallow it, but before it gets to the stomach, it gets held in the crop.
I think that's called gizzard.
What's called the gizzard?
That that's why birds will peck little pebbles and just swallow little pebbles that goes into the gizzard, and then that gizzard will grind up grainy or tough products that our intestines are designed to do. With they has a muscle that will push grain against little rocks that they eat.
So you're saying the gizzard is in the neck?
The gizzard is after the crop.
Okay.
If you look at the fourth and fifth words in English, I mean, it could be read colon.
I don't know. Okay, whatever. We'll figure it out, guys. We'll figure it out. But here, right, obviously, from the context, right, we're talking here about the entrails, That's, unless I'm like, totally off over here, right? Which, maybe I'm half asleep. I don't know.
Well, no, but you're saying crop, and that's what Jastrow has. So if that's what
Right.
the Zepek is, so
Right, but from my understanding, the crop was, in the entrails. I don't know, but I'm sorry.
no, it's
Whatever.
okay. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
get a chance
We'll
on
we'll look into it. Visit the show.
biology later. Okay.
I remember also, that I had this book, by I think it was Art Scroll, like when I was younger, and it had like a diagram of the bird's anatomy. So from what I remember, it was a long time ago. We're talking about 30 plus years. But from what I remember, the crop was like in the digestive system, like in the entrails. I don't know, but
I
whatever.
wonder if it's present only in clean birds. That would be interesting.
Well, okay. Well, that's an interesting question. Okay, well, I don't know about that, but
That's what
it's probably the same.
that's what Jastrow says, that the Zepek is one of the signs of a clean animal.
The Zefek is clean. Oh, interesting. Oh, okay, okay.
This
All
is
right.
Jastrow says Zepek. It says birds crop, one of the signs of clean birds.
Oh, they construct it differently on the inside. Interesting.
All right. Well, okay. It's an interesting conversation. But anyway, right, I'll just go on with your permission. So right, so this is the machloket that we have here. So let's look at the Bet Yosef. Very interesting. Yeah. So says Bet Yosef, right? Maybe he'll give us some clue here over here. Bet Yosef, right, regarding this issue. Machloket zo ketava Mordechai. So it says it's written in Mordechai, this machloket. Beperek kol sha'a. Gabedag tameh shenimtza bedag tahor, right? So it's talking about there a case where you have one fish that swallowed the other, right? One is a pure fish, one is kosher, the other one is not kosher, whatever. We need bashil and it got cooked. והגאות מימוניות כתבו בפרק א' בשם ספר המצוות, right? He writes it over there. דאף אגב דעניין טומאה הווה עיקול לעניין איסור לא הווה עיקול. So it says even though regarding, purity and impurity, it's considered to be digestion, but regarding, by the way, I could be wrong, just I'm going on a very long-term memory here, so I could be totally like wrong, whatever. But anyway, right? So we'll see how that goes. So right, he says, "Have cool and the isur and have cool." The chen katav samag. That's what it says in samag. Okay, the katav tosfot pek gidan Hashem. That's what it says in tosfot. So, b'shem Rabbeinu Tam, name Rabbeinu Tam. Interesting. Okay, so we have several Rishonim, right, that hold like this. Meaning what? They hold like the Rosh, that it's considered to be still not digested, whatever. בשם רבנו תם גבי עד אמר רבה אמור רבנן בשישים וכן משמע בדברי הר"ן. Also the Rani says כתב בסוף פרק כל שעה חיטה או שעורה שנמצא בזפק עוף לאחר שיבהרו אותו. So it says you found, right, again, if you found wheat or barley in the zefek, right, whatever, after you singed it, so it says we're not concerned about that, right? He holds, yeah. So he says that even though regarding prohibition, right, it's considered to be food. Like it says in Bechot, so it says nevertheless, whatever is roasted, right, the chicken, whatever, because they're singeing it, it's enough to take the surrounding area, as we said. So you're not going to have this issue of, that it's not going to get nullified. Only with cooking you have that issue. In other words, with water, right? But it says when it comes to roasted, just enough to take the surrounding area because it's dry, right? That's why. Right? So also he says you have the the skin of the zefek, which is considered to be like some kind of a. In other words, it's already like surrounding area. That's good enough already as it is. Right? Okay. So then he goes on. All right, the same thing, right? He says, if you find the wheat in the zefek, so it says, even though we say, right, in general, that on Passover there's no nullification, but it says here, because it's only roasted, so it's only going to just, forbid the surrounding area. So he says the zefek itself is already like the surrounding area. So in other words, once you remove the zefek, the rest of the animal, the rest of the bird is good. Okay, very nice. So then he goes on. Ha'agur katav b'shem ha'geonim maseh haya v'tir mori. So he says he brings the story. This rabbi, true story, whatever. That in the name of the Geonim, that it says my rabbi was allowed this kind of case, right? Tanagolet shenim lega alidei klipa share alidei hamayim mitarev hatam bekula kamo shekatav Rabbeinu b'shem Ravan. So he says, right, that the same thing happened over there, that this rabbi allowed to have the chicken maybe I should read this again. I think I skipped something. So it says one more time. So he says like this. Yeah. So it says Veitir Mori Tarnagolet Shenim Lega Bechamin BePesach. He allowed a chicken, right, that was singed like that, right, on Passover. והיה זפק עמה, and then the zefek was there. ובה היו חיטים, and this is there was a wheat there, right, in the zefek. והתיר מטעם דקרום הזפק מפסיק בינו לבין הבשר. So it says he allowed it. Why? Because the shell of the zefek, right, the out, in other words, the the membrane, right, whatever that surrounds it, is enough already. That's good enough, just to remove that. ודבר תמה הוא להתיר במדיגה על ידי קליפה, שהרי על ידי המים מתערב המים מכולה. So it says, but it's so wondrous, right? How do you allow this in a case like this? Why? Because here, right, it was used with water, so it says then, they really shouldn't have allowed that. Because since it was boiled in water, then, right, it spreads all over the chicken, and therefore it's forbidden on Passover, right? When you're cooking it on Passover like that, when you're singeing it, whatever. So that's the story, yeah. So in other words, the general rule is like this, right? When it comes to roasting, we say just the surrounding area is enough, right? When it comes to cooking in water, so there the whole chicken is forbidden, right? If this happened on Passover itself. Okay, good, very pretty straightforward. So the only thing which we still, right, we need to know what the zefek exactly is, but whatever it is, right? I'm sorry, what was
I apologize. So you said that if we cooked, I apologize. Question, you said if we put the chicken in water and we find the weed in the insides,
right?
is void, right?
The whole chicken is forbidden.
Forbidden. It doesn't matter where you find it.
Because the
weed
water
inside.
the water spreads the taste all over
Okay,
of the wheat.
I understood.
This is the problem, yeah.
The wheat.
When it comes to roasting, right, just the surrounding area is enough. The rest of the chicken
I
you can.
understood. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so that's the story there, right? Good. Okay, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch, right? Let's go to the. Yeah, we're done. We're done with this chapter. Okay, so let's see Shulchan Aruch. Right, so again, right, we say, right, that chita or seora shenimtzet bezefek ha'of, right? If you found wheat or barley in a zefek, right, after of the bird, le'achar sheyivhavu oto, right, after you singed it, ha'of mutar, the chicken is allowed, right? Doesn't forbid the chicken. Ve'achita ve'asora tzarich lesorafam. So you got to burn the wheat or the barley, right? So he says, why is that? Oh, they're not considered to be digested, right? And for this halacha. So he paskins like the Rosh, right? And there was also many other Rishonim that agreed with him there, as we saw in the Bet Yosef. And this seems like it's the majority, so that's pretty clear, right? That we have to consider it to be not digested. So let me just see the Mishnah Berurah here, if he explains anything. Give us a hint of what's, a little bit context here. Interesting to see what it says here. Okay, so Mishnah Berurah, right, says something interesting here, very relevant for the Ashkenazim, right? So he says, right, that even though the Ashkenazim are stringent in cases of roasting, right, that they forbid the whole chicken. They're stringent about this, We already saw this in the Ramah, if I'm not mistaken, right? But he says, nevertheless, here we can be lenient, he says. Even the Ashkenazim, not to forbid the whole chicken. Why? Because he says, because singeing is not like roasting, In other words, it's not so strong like roasting itself. Good point. Okay, interesting. That's one Mishnah Berurah. Let's see what else he says here.
Did they only forbid on like chickens that have kernels in it, or is it like applied to?
I think the turkey would be the same.
No, I mean, what about like cows or fish or whatever?
Oh, uh, yeah. So, obviously it would be the same. I mean, more or less, because nobody, obviously, right? Nobody puts a whole cow in the pot, right? It's not going to fit in any pot, the whole cow, right?
No, but if you found grain in the cow's stomach or whatever, would that not be a problem?
Right. But what I'm saying is, you're not like, doing with the cow what you do with the chicken, because the chicken is like, like you just like singe it. Because the reason why they singe the chicken is to remove the feathers, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not really relevant with the cow, except that I think they singe some parts, to get rid of some things, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a big expert. I'm not a butcher, right? What can I tell you?
How about fish?
Yeah, so it would apply to anything, I mean, the truth is, even if it was what do you call it, head of cabbage, it would be the same thing. You know what I
Fish
mean?
don't eat grain.
I'm sorry.
There's no grain down there in the water aquatic atmosphere for fish to feed on. Where would they you'd have to guess that
Oh,
somebody
good question. I don't, yeah, you may be
it's a
right,
double
Michael.
barrel. You have to
You may be
guess
right, but
someone
you got me there, Michael. You got me there. Okay. So, right, who am I to argue with that? Right? I'm not gonna argue. But anyway, right, I was looking at the Mishnah over here. מלאכות שנמצא בזפק. Yeah. Right. So Mishnah Berurah also says another interesting thing, which is that why do we have to burn the wheat, right, and the barley? So he says because we assume that the moisture which is in the zefek will make it leaven. Okay, interesting, right? The point there, and then another thing. Um, all right, I guess we can leave it there. I'm not going to give this too much importance, right? This halakha is not really so practical for us. So I guess we can suffice with this right, with this treatment of this halakha. Okay, so let me just see. Yeah, I think we're done with this. Yeah, this chapter is definitely over. So let me just see where the next chapter is going here. Okay. So now we're done with baking matzot. Right. So now we're going into a different issue here, which is also important to know, by the way. Right. So we're just going to go into general laws of Passover, and this is, by the way, one of the important ones to know. So we'll just go right into it. Why not? Important to understand this. A lot of people, by the way, don't know these halachot. What I'm going to tell you now. So it's good to know, because otherwise you're going to come to make some mistakes. So it says in the Torah like this, right? העושה מלאכה בערב שבתות וימים טובים מן המנחה ולמעלה אינו רואה סימן ברכה לעולם. So he says, right, that there is a prohibition whether it's Erev Shabbat, right, or Erev Yom Tov, which means the eve of, right? In other words, before the night, right, in the afternoon. So of Yom Tov and Shabbat, that we're not supposed to do labor at that time. And if you do labor, he says, right, you're not going to see any blessing from that. No blessing from that labor. So, by the way, just if you want to know what it means to see blessing, what does that mean? It's what, blessed or not blessed, right? So it's explained, in the books that it means like this, right? That if you made money, right, a salary for that, for that labor that you did. Let's say, you're, I don't know, let's say you're a barber, right? So you did some haircuts, and you made some cash there, you pocketed some money, right? A lot of people want haircuts, Erev Shabbat, Erev Yom Tov, they want haircuts. They want to get ready, right? So you made some money there. So if you did, that money that you made, you'll just basically spend it. But if you try to make money from that money, like to invest it or whatever, it won't be blessed. It won't work. Not the end of the world, you can still spend it. Go to Costco, buy buy something there, no problem. But right, the money it won't regenerate, that money, right, and make some more money, right? That's what we're talking about. Okay, whatever. So anyway, right, so ובערב פסח מחצות ומעלה אסור. So from when it comes to Erev Pesach, right, the eve of Passover, from which hour is it forbidden to do labor? So right, the rule is after Chatzot, right, which is midday. So now that we're in daylight savings, midday around here in my area is about 1 o'clock. Right, so after 1 o'clock, 1 p.m., you're not supposed to be doing labor, right? So, by the way, when I tell you about labor, I'm not talking about getting ready for the holiday, right, cooking and stuff like this, or going to the store and buying something. I'm not talking about that. That's not the kind of labor I'm talking about. Right? I'm talking about labor, to make money, right? In other words, you're doing some kind of a job. Right? That's the kind of labor we're talking about. We're gonna get into a little bit, probably, right? The whole thing over here, but that's the general idea, so that doesn't mean you can't, right? Do your preparations for Shabbat or Yom Tov. That you can do for sure. But there are certain things you're not supposed to do, right? We'll see now, right? What that entails. Okay. So he says, right, that so he says, what about before midday? Right, on Erev Pesach. So he said that's like custom, some places have a custom to be lenient, some stringent. So he says the place where they're stringent, it's forbidden, right? In other words, even before midday. So it's a place where they were not accustomed, it's allowed before midday. וכתב אבי העזרי דווקא שעושה מלאכה להסתכל, right? So again, right, the Avi Ezri, right, one of the Rishonim, he says here, we're talking about, what kind of labor are we talking about, right? To make money, right? To make some cash, get a salary, right? אבל מתקן הוא כלה בשבת, but he says you're allowed to, like do just things, for yourself, like he says you can, so what does that mean? He's talking about, for instance, let's say you have some utensils, right? You need to fix, but not for money, just for yourself, right? For your household use. Or let's say, you have, some clothing you need to sew up, to hem something, right? Whatever. So that you're allowed to do for yourself. It's not for money. It's just, you're doing it to get ready for the holiday or whatever, to get ready for Shabbat. Okay, so that's the story there. אבל מתקן הוא כלה בשבת. ויום טוב, וכן מי שכותב ספרים. So it's also somebody who writes books, לעצמו, for himself, right? Not to sell. Derech limudo, because he wants to, it helps him to learn, takes notes, takes notes, he writes stuff down, right? So something like that he can do, even though he's writing, right? Which is a labor, but, it's not forbidden because he's not making any money, according to this opinion, right? So that's you can do all day, right? Until the sun goes down, right? You can do that, no problem. Okay, good. So let's see the Bet Yosef, right? We did already enough to. So here we are, right? In the Bet Yosef, he says, right, that regarding this issue of doing labor, where is it brought down? In the 4th parak of Psachim, right? Where is this? In Nun Amud Aleph, right? Which is 50a. Makom shenahagu la'asot melacha be'erev Psachim. It says over there, right? Place where they're accustomed to do labor on the eve of Passover, ad chatzot, until midday, right? In the morning, in other words. Osin, you can do. But if the custom is not to do, and osin, you cannot even do. You cannot do. Even before midday. So that's the Mishnah, right? Probably, yeah. Okay, so then it says in the Gemara there, right? The Gemara, my area arbe psachim, afilu arbe shabbatot ve'arbe yamim tovim. So Gemara asks a good question, right? Over there. Gemara asks, what? Why are you talking about Dafka Pesach? You know, it could be also Erev Shabbat, it's the same thing, right? Or some other Yom Tov. Why Dafka are you talking to me about Pesach? What? Pesach is something unique? You're not supposed to be doing labor also on the other holidays as well, before the other holidays, or Shabbat. So why Dafka are you talking about Pesach? Right. So what's the answer? Tanya עושה מלאכה בערב שבתות, בערב ימים טובים, מן המנחה ולמעלה אינו רואה סימן ברכה. Because we already learned, right, that if you do labor on any Erev Yom Tov or any Erev Shabbat, right, whatever, you won't see any blessing from that money, right, all that stuff, as we mentioned. התם מן המנחה ולמעלה הוא דאסור, סמוך למנחה לא. הכה במחצות אין המנחה. Right, so he tells you, right, what's the difference? Passover were even more stringent, right, than the other ones. What does that mean? That we forbid it from midday, right? But on the other holidays or Shabbat, we only forbid it from the time of Mincha, which is later, right? In the afternoon, a little bit. But,
Plaga Mincha? Kabbalat Harav?
no, Plaga Mincha is much later, right?
Mincha, you're talking about which one is it? Is it Mincha Gedolah, Plaga Mincha?
Right. So he just right now, for sure, it's not Plaga Mincha, right? Because Plaga Mincha is like 1 hour before sunset.
Mm-hmm.
That's much later, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about that. That's for sure. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the time of Mincha. In other words, the time that you can say Mincha prayers, right? Which is later, right? So as I think you mentioned, right, just now, that when it comes to Mincha prayers, we have 2 times, right? Mincha Gdolah, Mincha Ktana. Did you mention that?
And Mincha Gedolah, no?
And there's also Mincha Ktana.
Yes.
So what's the difference? Mincha Gdolah, right? It's like 1/2 hour after midday. And Mincha Ktana is like 2.5 hours after.
That's the one in between, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have several different stages, right? We have, first of all, midday, chatzot. Then we have Mincha Gdolah, which is a 1/2 hour later. Then we have Mincha Ktana, which is 2.5 hours later. And then we have Plaga Mincha, right, which is 1 hour before sunset. And then we have Shkia, right, sunset itself. So these are all different stages, right, of the coming of evening. So yeah, these are all called evening, right? In the halacha, all these things. Okay, whatever, right? So anyway, right, the point is that when it comes to Passover, we forbid from midday, right? From chatzot. But when it comes to, right, the other holidays and Shabbat, only from mincha. So we'll see, right, which mincha we're talking about. We have to see that, right? So far, I didn't talk about that. So לא מחצות אינה חתם סימן ברכה הוא דלא האחה זה אבל שמותי לא משמתין עליה האחה שמותי משמתין עליה. So it gives also another difference, right, between the other ones and Passover. When it comes to the other ones, if he does it, right, if he transgressed and he did labor, we don't excommunicate him. But on a Passover, we excommunicate him. Can you imagine? We excommunicate the guy. He does labor. Okay. By the way, today excommunications are not done, for these kinds of things. It's not common practice, right, to do things like this today, and nobody does it. And the reason is because nobody knows what they're doing, So what are you going to excommunicate some ignoramus, right, who doesn't know what he's doing? He doesn't even have to keep Shabbat. You can excommunicate him from doing labor on Erev Pesach. That makes no sense, right? Yeah, we're just too much on the level is too low to do things like that today. Yeah, I'm sorry. What are you going to say?
If it meant from excommunication from heaven, since we don't know how to do it.
No, yeah, we're not talking about it from heaven. We're talking about the Bet Din will excommunicate him. You know what I mean?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. The heavenly excommunication, that's a different story. Right, that's something else. Right. It's not talking about that here. How do I know it's not talking about that? Because the language, right? Meshamtinale, which means we excommunicate him, right? Not they, we, right? They means, up there in heaven, right? That's something else. Okay. Anyway, right? The Katav Rabbeinu.
It's not in heaven.
I'm sorry.
The Torah is not in heaven.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I know what you're saying. In other words, you're saying that, right? But that's a little bit different. What
I know,
Michael is
it's
saying over here. What Michael is saying a little bit different. I'll tell you why. What you're right. Lomina shamayim here, right? We say, right? The Torah is not from heaven. What does that mean? Once we were given the Torah on Har Sinai, so now the rabbis have to decide the halacha, right? They don't decide the halacha in Shemaim. That's what it means. What you're saying, right?
Yeah.
But it's not relevant over here because they can excommunicate you, from heaven, even though they don't decide the halacha there. But excommunication sometimes they can do.
I was being funny.
Okay, well, we got a good laugh out of it. So, so anyway, right? It says, "V'shamtina le'achad v'shemot v'shamtina." Katav Rabbeinu kitzei shinui da'aminan be'gemara. So Rabbeinu said the two he wrote both these answers. Mishum delishna de'ename zeh v'zeh mashma. So because it seems like both of them are correct. V'kachem divrei Rambam. The Rambam also brings this down, right? Besof halachot Yom Tov, at the end of the laws of Yom Tov. Katav Haran, says the Ran. That which we said, right, that we're more stringent when it comes to Erev Pesach, Mishar Yamim, right, than the other right, Yamim Tovim, the other Erev, the other holidays or the Shabbat. Mifaresh Yerushalmi, it says in Yerushalmi regarding that, explains. דהיינו תמה משום דזמן פסח מחצות ואילך וביום שיחיד מביא קורבן אסור לעשות מלאכה. So he says the reason why we're more stringent about Passover, you know why that is? Because at that time, when the temple was built, they used to bring the Korban Pesach at that time, in the morning, in the afternoon, right? So therefore, right, since it was time for the Korban Pesach, you shouldn't be going around and doing other things, like, doing haircuts, or in a barber shop, you know what I mean? Not the time for this kind of stuff. So it's considered to be more, egregious, right? This kind of thing. Than just, any other holiday. Okay. So it says when you're bringing a sacrifice, you're not allowed to do labor at that time, right? There's a rule like that. So then he says, why is it that it's only forbidden after midday? Right? Because you're not allowed to bring the Korban Pesach, right? The sacrifice until midday. That's the reason why. Katav Raza, says the Raza, Pesach. So right, it says now we don't have the right to sacrifice. We don't do any sacrifice. Right? Lo shani lan ben arbe psachim l'shar arbe yamim tovim. So it says, therefore, he says there's no difference between Erev Pesach and all the other holidays. But the people answered him, right? The other rabbis, right, disagreed with him, and they said, no. Once the rabbis decreed this, even though it's not relevant today, right, we can't go back, right? We can't backtrack on that. The Rosh also says this. That since in the time of Pesach, it was forbidden to do that, right, because of the sacrifice that they used to bring. Even though now we don't have sacrifices, right? Nobody does nothing there. Right? Asur, right? It's still going to be forbidden anyway, because the rabbis decreed that. He brought a source for that. Interesting. Okay, good. So that's the right Bet Yosef. Let's see Shulchan Aruch and we're done. Okay. Yeah. So this Shulchan Aruch we're gonna have to erase because this is from the last chapter. We have to bring it up. Tach Samech Chet. Okay. So let's see where we are here. Okay, so says Shulchan Aruch, right? Oh my God, I'm in the wrong place here. Second. I don't know how I got here. 1 second. Okay, now I see what the problem is. I see what the problem is. So it says in Shulchan Aruch like this, right? Ha'oseh melacha b'erev Pesach, one who does labor, right, on the eve of Passover, mechatzot ulmala. When is that? After midday, right? Hayu mishamtim atzos. So in the old days, he says, right? Hayud, in the old days, they would excommunicate him, right? Today we don't do it. Okay, we don't do that, right? But it's still forbidden, nevertheless, right? Look what it says, right? It's even forbidden to do this for free, to do labor. So what does that mean? That if somebody comes and tells you, yeah, I need a haircut, so, you tell him, well, I can't do it for money, but I'll do it for free. You can't even do that. Right? The question is, where does he get this from, right? Because we didn't see this in the Bet Yosef. Anyway, right, it says, Ve'esh mi she'oser afilu al yedei eno yehudi, ve'esh mi she'matir. What about if you're going to go to a barber who's a goy, right? Or some other labor, whatever it is. So some, it says, forbid that, some permit that. So it seems like the halacha is that it's permitted, So in other words, if you're in a bind, right, and you need to go to a barber, you can go to a goyish barber.
Do they say anything about someone who's like a non-professional?
No, we don't differentiate here in that regard. By the way, that differentiation is made in the laws of Chol HaMoed in certain things. Professional job, amateur job. Here we don't really find that so much in this halakha, but we'll go on and we'll see, more, just from my recollection, I'm telling you, right? So don't quote me, but I think that's what it is. So anyway, right? That's what we're saying over here. So yeah, so bottom line is like this, right? That we're not going to excommunicate you today, but don't do it anyway. And even for free, right? So here there's a Mishnah Brura regarding that issue of free, doing it for free. Let's just see what he says here. Right. So he says, right, that only applies if it's like a true labor, something like a true labor, as opposed to like a quasi-labor kind of thing, which is not really, What's the difference, by the way, between a true labor and a quasi-labor? We'll see next time, we'll get into that a little bit more. But I think that, when we talk about a true labor, we're talking about something which is like, involves a certain level of exertion, something which, it's like a job. You're doing a job. That's called a true labor, right? As opposed to what? As opposed to like driving your car, even though on Shabbat, right, it's a labor to drive your car. But, we're not going to say don't drive your car Erev Pesach, If you need to go to the mikveh, let's say, right, to, immerse some utensils. Oh, but it's Erev Pesach, you can't do labor. No, it's not talking about that, right? We're talking about real labor, Driving a car is not labor. It's, it's for some people's pleasure. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a job, It's something which is a real job. Okay, so we'll stop there, I guess, right? And we'll continue B'ezrat Hashem next time. So we're getting into the laws of Passover now, the general laws, and that's good. Baruch Hashem, we're done with the matzah. So we'll B'ezrat Hashem. Hopefully, we'll do all the important stuff before Passover arrives. God willing, V'lei neder. Okay, thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. We'll see you tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem. And Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov.
Couple tov. Thank you so much.
Bless.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God bless. All the best.